So, we are looking at today the various economic policies and other social aspects in the colonies, beginning with mercantilism. Mercantilism is a system where nations attempt to increase their wealth and power through trade with their colonies. The whole point of this is that they take advantage of the colonies by limiting their trade, and it's all in an effort so they could establish a favorable balance of trade, which means they are going to sell more than they import from the colonies. So what they're getting from the colonies are going to be your raw materials. They're going to produce them back in their home country and then sell it back to the colonies for a profit. The social system in the colonies is going to be established that there is a lot of prosperity available, a tremendous amount of opportunity in the colonies, which allow many people the ability to go there and be able to make a good life for themselves. The colonies were very successful traders. They knew what they had in raw materials, and they knew that those were very valuable raw materials. Things like lumber, furs, fish, grain, and tobacco were all sent to Europe. Again, raw materials. They are going to be the ones who are buying very large quantities of finished products. Parliament is eventually going to pass the Navigation Acts that is going to restrict how colonists could do their business. Now remember, they had been very successful traders, and their ability had been there so that they could trade with who they wanted to, ship things where they wanted to ship them, and on the ships that they wanted to. The Navigation Acts tried to take that away and attempted to be able to only trade with the colonies. It said they had to pay if they wanted to sell things to other countries other than England, and it said it had to be shipped on English ships. So it's going to put some really specific restrictions on those colonists who had been accustomed to not having those restrictions. The Glorious Revolution is going to be one of the points in history where we look at the people gaining more power. In 1688, this is going to establish that Parliament becomes the dominant force in the government as opposed to the king or the queen. So this again is going to be giving the people more of a voice in their government. England had always exercised a policy of salutary neglect. Salutary neglect is very loose supervision of the colonies, basically allowing them to completely govern themselves. So when you see this in the American colonies, you see a lot of self-government. Basically, the colonists were able to decide to lead their lives however they wanted to. So you're going to see a lot of religious, political, economic, and social freedoms in the colonies because they had basically been given the ability to do that. The John Peter Zenger trial is going to be one of a really important court case that is going to kind of establish the freedom of the press, where he is able to defend himself because what he published in a paper was true information and was not restricted. So this is one of those founding principles that America is founded on, that the press is not controlled by the government. There's a lot of different immigrants coming into the American colonies at this point. Lots of different groups of people, lots of religions, lots of culture. You have English, Germans, and Irish at this point who were your largest number of immigrants. Now, you see time and time again that anytime you have a large influx of immigrants, you're going to start seeing resentment and discrimination against those immigrants because of the same concerns we hear today, things like job competition, changing culture, and different ideas. So we don't like, in general, people do not like for there to be change, and that's one of the problems that we're seeing here. We do see cities begin to develop. Most of them are port cities. These are going to be your trading centers and your financial centers. So this is where most of your banking would occur. This is where most of your business is going to occur, are in these major cities. And most of them were port cities because, like you see here, this is the shoreline of Charleston. This still looks very similar to Charleston if you go there today. Charleston was one of the only port cities in the South, but some of the other major port cities were going to be Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and again Charleston. There were many problems in these cities, problems like fire, because most of these buildings were made of wood and there were no established fire departments. The way they handled fire was if there was a fire, they would ring a bell in the town center and everyone would come with their bucket to put the fire out. Clean water was another major issue. Waste, what they did with their waste, how they disposed of it was another major problem. So sanitation, poverty is also going to be another big issue as far as how do they deal with poverty in those cities. Slavery in the United States, we see, or in the American colonies, is going to begin when slaves begin to replace not only Native Americans, but also indentured servants. Again, this is from kind of a financial aspect. Triangle trade or triangular trade at this point in time was where we're going to trade slaves for sugar and then rum, and you see it from Europe down to Africa and then to the colony. So you're going to make that kind of triangle trade between those three areas. Now, that middle passage is going to be the journey that's going to take slaves from Africa to North America on a horrific journey. These slaves were going to be packed into these ships, as many as they could. They were kept below deck with terrible conditions. They were often chained down there because many, if they were allowed above on deck, many of them jumped overboard to avoid the life they knew they were going to. So this is going to be such a terrible condition that they were treated. And once they got there, they kind of knew what they were going to be facing. So this is going to be that terrible journey, that middle passage. Slave culture. They will bring with them various aspects of their own culture, and it begins to all kind of interact with and impact the culture already in the colonies. They bring dance and their own religion, and again, over time and over generations after generation, we see that begin to kind of melt together and form their very own unique culture here in the colonies and what goes on to become the United States. Now, we do see resistance in various forms. Oftentimes, they obviously did not have like military power to be able to resist, but they did resist in various ways that we will look at a little later. But they also, things like I already said, jumping overboard to prevent them from becoming slaves to start with. Other methods of resistance, just very small methods of resistance were used. So don't think that they never tried to resist. They did. And in fact, there were slave rebellions that were, fairly successful at the time, eventually were put down, obviously. But we do see that resistance start, and it does start early.